I love George Romero and I love found footage films actually, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I think George Romero should have been doing found footage films. Hi guys, and welcome to part 5 of my George Romero of the Dead review series, for the want of a better way of phrasing it. With this one, Romero goes all the way back to day 1 of the outbreak and shows us some different events happening within a different group we've never seen before. I guess he felt he'd gone as far into the future as he wanted to go with Land of the Dead. So the plot in this sees a group of college-age students in the woods filming some kind of indie film that they've got going on. It's a film about a mummy chasing some characters in the woods or something. Absolutely my sort of indie film. I would have loved to have made a film like that at college. Not that I did film studies or anything. But halfway through shooting scenes, they are interrupted when news of the outbreak hits them, and they jump into a camper van and decide to go and check on all their parents or something. That is basically the plot of Diary of the Dead. My first problem with this movie, and it's the first of several, is just the sheer amount of tech used in it. We've got cell phones, camcorders, internet, uploads, downloads. It's very 2007, this movie, or whatever year it came out in. It makes no attempt to hide the year that it came out in, which means that this film really does not mesh with the other films that we've seen up to this point. It is just impossible to watch Diary of the Dead and imagine that Night of the Living Dead could be happening 5 miles away. It just doesn't work for me. So the more I watch these films now, especially these later ones, I kind of feel like Romero was doing a completely different universe with his second trilogy especially. I think Land, Diary and Survival are probably a different universe to Night, Dawn and Day. I can make an argument for Land of the Dead following on from the first 3 films, but not Diary of the Dead. And the next annoying thing, and I'm still on about the technology angle here, there's this massive effort in this film to explain why the characters continue to film throughout the story. And this is very much a noughties thing. Like back in 2007, found footage was still reasonably new. It was still sort of in its first decade. And I guess filmmakers were a little bit nervous of viewers asking the question, why are these characters filming this? It doesn't make any sense to me. And so they put in all these explanations as to why that just aren't necessary. I think in 2023, if new found footage films come out now, I think it's more just an accepted cliche that characters will keep on rolling throughout a story. As somebody who's seen a lot of found footage films, I don't need an explanation necessarily as to why characters just carry on filming. I can just accept it for what it is, just a necessity for us to be able to watch the film in the first place. But throughout Diary of the Dead, it's just constant explanations and excuses as to why we're still filming from one scene to the next. It's like, just shut up about the cameras and get on with the movie. And there's this ongoing confrontation between the main male lead, who's doing most of the filming, and his potential would-be love interest. They're sort of arguing as to whether they need to keep filming, and this one particular girl, she's really antagonistic towards this guy because of his filming habits in such a dangerous situation, but it just grinded on me after a while. I'm just like, I really don't want to know about this, guys. Can we just focus on the zombie problem and just let this guy film? But the hypocrisy of this female character, her name's going to come to me in a minute. So there's one scene where, after all this sniping about filming, she grabs her camera herself at one point, just as this other guy is struggling with a zombie, and instead of helping this guy, she just films him. And it's just ridiculous that she would be filming and not helping this guy out of his predicament. And while she's doing that, there's another character filming at the same time. So you got this one scene where 2 characters are just rolling film while this one character's grappling a zombie, and that just took me out of the movie at that point. And it just didn't make any sense to me. It just didn't look right that characters would behave this way. And I think this was about half an hour in, and at this point I was already stockpiling any number of complaints about this movie. Another thing that irritated me, so at the end of this story, the Deborah character, there you go, I've remembered her name, she takes all the footage that's been recorded with the cameras and she splices it all together to make the movie that we're going to be watching. I'm not just guessing this. She explains this at the beginning of Diary of the Dead. The footage you're about to watch is blah, blah, blah. I've edited it all together, etc., etc. But she's added these, like, narration bits to the movie as well. So every 5 or 10 minutes, she'll suddenly pipe up over the top of the film and just talk some random bollocks that just tells you nothing about nothing. It all reminds me a lot of when Sarah Connor did a similar thing in Terminator 1 and Terminator 2. Not one of James Cameron's best ideas, because I don't think she came out with anything interesting either. So in this film, you'll often hear Deborah, just after a big action sequence and the camper van's got back on the road, she'll come out with some random shit like, and now, the future to me was like a dark highway at night. I just couldn't see more than 50 yards in front of myself anymore. She's saying nothing about nothing. It's like these bits are absolutely pointless. I'm sort of convinced that if Bub from Day of the Dead had been in this movie, Deborah would have ended up saying something like, the more I saw Bub interact with John, the more I realised that he would make a better father figure than any real man. Okay, I'm going a bit far there, but you get the point. These bits are just absolute drivel and just add nothing to the movie. The whole plot of this is really lackluster, almost just non-existent. Like I explained at the start of this review, a quick synopsis of this, but there's no structure to this plot or arc. Like this camper van starts off in one location and just stops at a few places throughout the film, and there's no escalation of anything. For example, the camper van goes to a garage at one point and we see these looters who are stockpiling weapons. There's another bit where the van stops at Deborah's house. There's another bit where the van visits a hospital and we get some action there. But there's no order to it, or, you know, one bit doesn't follow on from another bit for a reason. In the editing room, they could have mixed all these different parts of the film into a completely different order, and I don't think it would have made any difference. And none of these individual segments are even that enjoyable to watch. For the finale, we get to go to this mansion. So one of the kids he's got rich parents, and this is like the first interesting place we've been to in the whole film. But then the movie just kind of abruptly ends, just when I'm thinking, oh, okay, this could be cool. At least we might finish strong. There might be like a big zombie siege on this mansion, and maybe a couple of them will just about manage to sneak out. That could be an exciting end, but just when this is threatening to happen, we get the credits, and it's like, oh my God, really? Like, could we have just not gotten to the mansion maybe 20 minutes earlier, cut out a lot of the faff from earlier on in the movie, so we could have at least had a good ending? It's just nonsensical to me. It doesn't make any sense. And what makes it worse is the fact that just after this film is over, you get written and directed by George Romero very, very quickly afterwards. I didn't want to know that George just straight after this film. I just wanted to kind of go away and presume that someone else had written it. The characters in this film just did nothing for me. Like, at the beginning of this, there's this really clunky scene where the main guy with the camera goes round everybody in the van individually and gets them to say their name and a little bit about themselves. It's a really clunky way of introducing the main characters to the audience, but I just found myself zoning out during the scene. Honestly, it's like a big information dump of characters' names and their hopes for the future, and it was just going in one of my ears and out the other, honestly. I don't think at any point during this movie I knew how many protagonists there were in the van. Normally I know the number of the good characters that I'm following. Not on this occasion, and it's not like there were 15, 16 characters to keep track of. There was maybe 6 or 7 tops in this movie, and at no point did I ever know the exact number of them. I just didn't care enough. There's one scene fairly early on where this woman shoots herself in the head on a cigarette break or something. And you know what? I've seen this film 3 times in total since it came out. Probably never again, hopefully. It's going to be 3 strikes and out with me in this film. But every time I've watched this, when it gets to this scene where this woman shoots herself in the head, I don't think I've ever properly realised which character it is who's done this. I'm constantly thinking, okay, presumably she was on the van, but have we spent any time talking with her before now? Hey-ho, I guess we'll just see what happens from here, whether the characters can save her by taking her to a hospital, whatever. But yeah, me and the characters in this film really didn't get on very well. There's a scene near the start, like I mentioned earlier, where they're trying to film this cheap horror film about a mummy or something, but what should have been a really fun scene to kick the movie off, before the apocalypse has actually happened, it it just becomes a real chore to get through, because the minute that this one guy yells cut, like they all start sniping with each other and being really antagonistic towards each other, and it's like, why are you doing that? This is just like a fun student film. Have fun. If this was in real life, all these people would be having a good time with each other and seeing the funny side and enjoying being out late at night, but they're not. They're acting like they're professional actors and directors on like a proper film set, and like bigwigs from Universal are chasing them to get this film in the can before the deadline or something like that. That's how they're acting, but it just doesn't feel right based on, you know, what this indie film is. And another thing that bugged me, this is a slightly smaller thing, I guess, but the woman who's being chased by the mummy, as soon as this guy yells cut, she immediately stands up and launches into this tirade about how, oh, have you ever noticed that women in horror films just constantly trip over? What is that? It's like this film wanted to do that whole Scream 2 thing where they start talking about horror conventions and things, but the thing is, in the Scream films in particular, they normally pick their moments to do that kind of stuff. It normally feels natural for the scene. In this film, it doesn't feel natural for the scene. It doesn't feel to me like this woman, after being chased through the woods and, you know, she's got dirt all on her and she's frustrated anyway with how this shoot is going, she's just going to randomly stand up and start doing this whole Scream 2 talking about horror conventions thing in the middle of the night. It just didn't fit for me at all. I know I've been on a bit of a rant, but I do have a couple of positives to mention. Firstly, there are 2 or 3 decent zombie kills in this film. So one of them, a guy throws a beaker of acid on a zombie and you get to see his head melt, and it's pretty cool. And there's another kill where this character grabs those electrocution things that you see in hospitals, you know, that they used to try and resuscitate people who were almost dying, you know, and they go, clear! Shh. Yeah, there's a good kill involving those in this film. But by weird coincidence, so as I'm filming this video, Scream 6 is about to come out in the UK, so what I thought I'd do this week is rewatch Scream 4 and 5 to prepare for number 6. Don't really have time to watch the entire Scream run, but I thought if I just watch 4 and 5, that'll leave me in good stead for when I go to the cinema later this week. So I watched Scream 4 last night, actually, and there's also a kill in that film that involves those same electrical things from a hospital. It's weird when you sometimes watch completely unrelated films back to back over a couple of nights. You'll see these weird things that kind of tie the films together in some unexpected way. But anyway, so yeah, some decent kills in this. There's also a cool thing which I liked. So the guy who's in the mummy costume in this indie film near the start, later in the movie he gets turned and starts shambling after the other characters as if he actually is a mummy. I thought that was kind of a cool thing. I probably should have seen the setup of what they were doing with that at the start, but credit where it's due. But that's all I can say, really. For the most part, this is a disappointing movie for me. I will quickly show you the version that I own for this. I've got this as part of a triple pack, and even this has pissed me off when it comes to this film, because this triple pack, I've said this on this channel before, actually, when I was doing some other video, I can't remember what, but basically, this pack is Diary of the Dead, Day of the Dead, and Survival of the Dead, but the Day of the Dead is not actually the proper Day of the Dead. It's really deceptive. And when I realised this, I was kind of half angry at whoever released this and half angry at myself for not properly investigating what was on this pack. But still, the fact that they would do that really does kind of suck. Although it's not really a Diary of the Dead thing, it's more of a Day of the Dead thing. You think that with a pack like this, the 3 films, they'd be just like 3 vanilla discs, but actually there is a commentary track for Diary of the Dead on this, commentary by director, editor, and director of photography. So Romero, you know, he has done a track talking about this film. Clearly he's, you know, proud of it to some extent that he would do that, but I can't be bothered listening to that track. It's not going to make the film any better for me, and I've got to say I'm unlikely to watch this one ever again unless it was like part of a social occasion, or maybe my son wanted to go through these movies one day. I guess I'd do that with him, although I think when we get to Diary of the Dead, in that scenario, I'll probably just kind of tell him to watch it and I'll sit near him just, you know, checking out the sports scores or whatever, and I'll look up when they do the acid kill, maybe. Right, enough ramble. Let's get to the bag of terror and find out what sort of score I'm going to give this film. Not a lot in the bag today. 1.5 bloody axes out of 5. This is the first extremely disappointing film in this franchise for me. We have one more to go, Survival of the Dead. I have seen it before. I'm not going to give away my thoughts on that just yet, though I am going to rewatch it, I think, before I do my review, obviously. So we'll see what I have to say about that. But until next time, cheerio, bye-bye.